She used to braid her hair every Sunday morning at the kitchen table. I'd sit across from her with my coffee, watching her fingers move like she was doing something sacred, and I'd think, this is it. This is the whole thing. This is what I was put here for. I don't know exactly when I stopped being enough. I've thought about it more times than I can count, lying on the couch in an apartment I never meant to live in alone, trying to pinpoint the moment. Was it the promotion I turned down to stay closer to home? The vacation we never took? The way I sometimes fell asleep before she came to bed? I've never found a clean answer. I'm not sure there is one. My name is Walter. I'm 47 years old. I work in structural engineering, and I spent 11 years being married to a woman I would have done anything for. I also spent 8 of those years being the only father a 9-year-old boy named Connor had ever really known. And that second part, that's the part that still hits me at odd moments. Driving to work, hearing a baseball game on the radio, the kids sections in grocery stores. I need to start at the beginning, though, because none of this makes sense without it. I met my wife at a work conference in Columbus. She was there with a colleague. I was there alone, and we ended up at the same hotel bar on a Thursday night that smelled like carpet cleaner and old wood. She had Connor with her. Not at the bar, obviously, but in the hotel. Her mother had driven up to watch him while she attended the conference. She mentioned him within the first 10 minutes of talking to me. His name, his age, the fact that his biological father had not been in the picture for 2 years. I remember thinking that was brave of her. Honest in a way that made me trust her immediately. Connor was a year old when his father left. No custody arrangement, no phone calls, nothing. Just a man who decided the weight of fatherhood was heavier than he'd expected and disappeared into his own life somewhere out west. I never met him. I heard his name maybe 3 times in 11 years and never from Connor's mouth. By the time I came into their lives, Connor was 3. He had a thing about dinosaurs and would correct adults when they got the names wrong. He said, actually, the way only very serious small children do. Heavy, authoritative, like he'd been waiting to use it. The first time he let me read to him was maybe 2 months in. He chose a book about a paleontologist, handed it to me without looking at me, and climbed up next to me on the couch like it was nothing. Like I'd always been there. His mother and I got married when he was 4. He was the ring bearer, and he took the job extremely seriously. For a long time, we were genuinely happy. I need you to understand that. This is not a story where the signs were always there, and I was too blind to see them. There were years, real substantial years, where our house was full and warm and the kind of place I had never actually had growing up. My own parents split when I was 11, and I spent my teenage years shuffling between 2 houses where I was always a little bit in the way. I told myself I would never give a kid that feeling. Connor was never going to grow up the way I did. He would have one home. He would have 2 people in it who stayed. I kept that promise for 8 years. The first sign I noticed, and I want to be precise here, because I've since gone back and reordered everything, was about 14 months ago. My wife started coming home later from work. She was a dental office manager, had been at the same practice for 6 years, and her hours had always been predictable. Suddenly, they weren't. I asked once, and she said they'd hired a new associate dentist, and the scheduling software was a disaster. Made complete sense. I dropped it. Then there was a weekend in March where she said she was visiting her college friend who had moved to Raleigh. She took an overnight bag. She was gone from Friday afternoon to Sunday evening. I remember making dinner for Connor and watching a movie with him and thinking nothing of it at all. She texted a few times, sent a photo of a restaurant table. I've thought about that photo. The corner of someone else's sleeve was just visible at the edge of the frame. I don't know if it means what I think it might mean, or if I'm just rewriting history now that I know the end. The cologne was in April. She came home from what she said was a happy hour with coworkers, and she sat next to me on the couch and I could smell it. Not her perfume. Something else. Something sharp and unfamiliar. She kissed me on the cheek and went to take a shower, and I sat there holding the remote, and I could not name what was happening in my chest. Not anger. Not quite. It was more like the feeling you get when you're driving and you think you might have missed a turn, but you're still hoping you didn't. So you keep going for another mile just to see. I kept going for another 3 months. I don't actually know when I decided I needed to look more carefully. It wasn't one moment. It was accumulation. The new habit of keeping her phone face down. The way she laughed differently on certain phone calls. Quieter and somehow more careful. The night she came to bed at midnight and said she'd lost track of time watching something. But the television in the living room was off and cold when I walked past it the next morning. I'm a structural engineer. My entire job is understanding what holds things up and what, under enough pressure, makes them fail. I am constitutionally incapable of ignoring load-bearing cracks. I hired an investigator the second week of July. I want to say something about that decision, because people have opinions about it. I was not acting from rage. I was not trying to catch her, to punish her. I genuinely needed to know what was real. When you've built 11 years on a foundation and you start to feel it shift, you need to know whether it's settling or whether something has actually given way. That is the only way I can explain it. The investigator's name was a woman named Patricia, but she told me her clients called her Pat, and she had 17 years of experience and a very plain way of speaking that I appreciated immediately. She told me what she would look for and approximately how long it would take, and that I should try not to check my phone every hour waiting for updates. I tried. I failed. 12 days later, she called me at work and told me she had documentation. She asked if I wanted to meet in person or receive the file digitally. I said in person. I sat in a diner 2 blocks from my office, and I opened a manila envelope, and I looked at photographs of my wife having lunch with a man I had never seen. They looked comfortable together, not romantically obvious in the photographs, but comfortable the way people are when they've been spending significant time together. There were 12 days of logs. The lunches happened 4 times. There was a date notation for a Thursday afternoon where her car was parked outside an apartment building on the east side of the city for 2 hours and 40 minutes. The man's name was found through his license plate. He had graduated from the same college as my wife. 3 years ahead of her. He had moved back to our city 14 months ago after a divorce of his own. He ran a small home renovation business. I sat in that diner for a long time after Pat left. I called my brother from the parking lot and could not quite get the words out the first time. It was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Okay, what do you need?" That's the kind of person my brother is. I told him I didn't know yet, and he said he was available whenever I figured it out. The hard part, the part that broke something in me that I'm still not sure has fully healed, was Connor. He was 12 at this point, old enough to understand more than I wanted him to. He called me by my name, always had, but in the way that was ours, his particular cadence. Slightly too long on the second syllable, like a nickname that had never needed to become one. He was in 7th grade. He had recently decided he wanted to play guitar. He had his mother's laugh and his own stubbornness, and he was, without question, one of my favorite people on the planet. I was not his biological father. His biological father was somewhere in Oregon, I think, but I had been at every school event, every doctor's appointment, every bad dream at 2 in the morning for 8 years. I had driven him to the emergency room when he broke his wrist rollerblading. I had sat in the parking lot of his school for 45 minutes the afternoon. His best friend moved away because he didn't want to go inside yet, and I wasn't going to make him. I had watched him go from a 3-year-old who handed me a dinosaur book to a 12-year-old who was learning bar chords and rolling his eyes at everything and quietly asking me questions he didn't want to ask his mother. If this marriage ended, what happened to us? I didn't confront her immediately. I know some people would have. I needed a week. I needed to understand what I actually wanted before I walked into that conversation, because I knew once it started, there was no pausing it. What I came to, slowly, over 7 days of eating meals across from her and watching Connor do homework at the kitchen table and lying awake at 3 in the morning, was this. I did not want to save the marriage. I don't think I had wanted that for months, even before I knew what I knew. What I wanted was to be honest, to be decent, and to protect Connor as much as I could from what was about to happen. I told her I needed to talk on a Tuesday night in August. Connor was at a friend's house. She was washing dishes when I said it, and she turned around with the dish towel in her hands and looked at me. And I think she knew immediately. People usually know when it's coming. They just keep hoping they're wrong. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she used to braid her hair every Sunday, and I put the folder on the table between us. I didn't open it. I told her I knew about the man. I told her I knew about the apartment. I told her I knew about the apartment. I told her I had documentation. She started crying before I finished the sentence. I want to be honest about what that was like, because it would be easier to say, I felt nothing. I didn't feel nothing. I felt grief, a specific kind of grief that has no name. The grief of watching someone you loved for a long time confirm your worst fear while also making it slightly less abstract. She sat there crying, and I thought about the bar in Columbus and the Sunday mornings and Connor handing me that book, and I felt something go out in me that had been lit for a very long time. She said she was sorry. She said it hadn't been planned. She said she hadn't known how to tell me things. Hadn't been right between us. She said things that, I believe, she mostly meant, and that were also, mostly, not the point. I asked her one question, not because I needed her permission, but because I believed she deserved to be asked. Did she want to try to work through it? She was quiet for a long time, and then she said she didn't know. I told her that wasn't good enough, that after 11 years and a child who called her mother in a house we'd paid off together, and every Sunday morning at this table, I needed more than, I don't know. I needed her to tell me the truth. She said she had feelings for him, that they'd been building since before anything physical happened, that she felt like she'd been trying to figure out who she was, outside of being someone's wife and someone's mother, and that she'd made choices she knew were wrong. I nodded. I told her I appreciated the honesty. I slept in the guest room that night. I lay there in the dark, and I thought about the man from the diner photo who ran a small renovation business and had moved back to our city 14 months ago. And I thought about the timeline, and I thought about Connor, and I stared at the ceiling until daylight. We told Connor together, because we had agreed that was the right thing to do, and because I was not going to let him hear it any other way. We sat with him on the couch on a Saturday morning, and we were careful with our words. We told him we had decided we could not stay married, that it was complicated between adults in ways that were not his fault, and had nothing to do with how much we both loved him. He looked at me. He didn't look at her first. He looked at me and he asked, "Are you staying in the house?" I said I didn't know yet, but I wasn't going anywhere far. He nodded in that particular way of his, slow, absorbing, and then he got up and went to his room. She moved out 4 weeks later. She moved into an apartment on the other side of the city. She and the man, I'll call him what he was, continued seeing each other. I don't know the current status of that. I stopped needing to know. What I did need to know was what happened with Connor. My wife and I had a long conversation about it. 2 conversations, actually, both difficult in different ways. I was not Connor's legal parent. We'd never pursued formal adoption, partly because his biological father had never officially relinquished rights, and partly because it had never felt necessary when everything was intact. Now, it felt very necessary. She said she would not keep Connor from me. She said that clearly, and I believed her. And to her credit, she has kept that word. We worked out an arrangement, not through lawyers at first, just between us, where Connor spent the majority of his time with me. She took him on weekends and some weeknights. He had his room in my apartment. He had his guitar and his books and his particular routine that I worked hard to keep consistent while everything else changed. About 6 months in, Connor asked me a question on a Wednesday night while we were eating dinner. He asked me if I was his dad. I put my fork down. I told him that biologically, I was not. He knew that, had always known that. But I told him that in every way I understood the word to mean yes. I had chosen him when he was 3 years old, and I had never once reconsidered that choice. He said okay. He went back to eating. That was it. He didn't make a production of it. He just needed to hear it said plainly, the way he always has needed things. He's always been like that. Not dramatic, just precise. He wanted the true answer without the performance around it. I gave him the true answer. Now let me tell you about the man with the renovation business, because this part matters and I want to tell it correctly. About 8 months after my wife moved out, Pat, the investigator I'd hired, sent me an email. She said she had come across something in the course of other work and thought I might want to know. She had found records indicating that the man had filed fraudulent permits on at least 3 renovation projects. He'd been using a licensed contractor's name without authorization, which meant that homeowners had paid for work that wasn't up to code and wasn't legally covered. One family had apparently had significant structural issues in their new addition as a result. 2 clients had filed complaints with the state contractor board. I read the email twice. I didn't have to do anything with the information. The complaints were already filed. The state board was already investigating. Pat told me it was likely he would lose his business license at minimum, and that civil suits from the affected homeowners were possible. I forwarded the email to my brother, who forwarded it to his wife, who said, "Karma is thorough." I don't feel satisfaction about it exactly. I feel something more like relief, that the story didn't require me to do anything except wait for the weight of bad choices to do what weight eventually does. He built things incorrectly and he misrepresented what he was, and eventually people found out. That's how it usually goes, in structures and in people. My wife found out around the same time. I don't know how she processed it. We talk when it concerns Connor, and we manage to be civil and occasionally even kind. She made choices I don't understand, and that cost us something I can't replace. But she's still Connor's mother, and she has been present, and that counts for something. The last thing I want to tell you, the part I keep coming back to, happened 3 months ago. Connor had a school project, the kind where they interview a family member and present it to the class. He could choose anyone. He chose me. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with a notebook and a list of questions his teacher had given him. He asked me about my job, my childhood, what advice I'd give my younger self. Standard stuff. And then at the end, he closed the notebook and looked at me and said off the list, "What's the thing you're most proud of?" I thought for a second, and then I said, "You." He gave me the look he gives me when he thinks I'm being sentimental. That combination of exasperation and affection that I suspect I'm going to miss extremely when he's grown. He wrote something in his notebook. He didn't show me what. He got an A on the project. His teacher emailed me separately to say his presentation had made 2 of his classmates cry. I believe it. He's precise and he's honest. And when he decides to let you see something, he doesn't hedge. I don't know what the next years look like in any detailed way. I'm in a smaller apartment than I'm used to. I work a job I'm good at. I go to Connor's school events, and I help him with math homework he pretends not to need help with. And I watch him learn things and grow into himself, and I think, every single time, this is it. This is the whole thing. I fell hard for a laugh 11 years ago in a hotel bar that smelled like carpet cleaner. I ended up here. And here, it turns out, is not the worst place to be. I've thought a lot about what actually happened here, not the events. I know the events by heart at this point, but the mechanics underneath them. Why things went the way they went. What made some things hold and other things fall apart. Here's what I keep coming back to. People reveal themselves slowly, and then all at once. My wife didn't become someone different overnight. The choices she made were built from smaller choices, each one a little more dishonest than the last, until the weight of them became something she couldn't carry quietly anymore. The man she left for did the same thing in his business. Cut corners, misrepresented himself, built things incorrectly and hoped nobody would notice. They were, in that sense, well matched. And they both ended up in roughly the same place, having to face what happens when you spend long enough pretending something is sound that isn't. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it's true, and because I think it's actually useful information. The thing about dishonesty, any kind, in a marriage or a business or anywhere else, is that it requires constant maintenance. You have to keep track of what you said, keep the surface looking smooth, keep adding small untruths to cover the ones that came before. That is exhausting work, and eventually, because people are not actually that good at it, something slips. A timeline doesn't add up. A photo has the wrong sleeve in the corner. Someone files a complaint with the contractor board. I'm not a perfect person. I'm sure I failed my wife in ways I still can't fully see. That's honest. But I didn't pretend. I didn't build a second life in the space between the life she thought we had. And when everything came apart, I could stand in the wreckage of 11 years and know exactly what I had actually done and what I hadn't. That knowledge is not nothing. It turns out to be one of the most stabilizing things a person can have. Connor taught me something too, though he didn't know he was doing it. That kid processed the worst year of his life by being precise and present and refusing to perform emotions he didn't feel. He asked the questions he needed answered. He waited for honest responses. He chose the parent who showed up consistently, not the one biology pointed to. He was 12 years old and he understood something that takes most adults decades to figure out, if they figure it out at all. That love is demonstrated, not declared. That who someone is in the ordinary moments. The homework nights, the parking lot waits, the questions asked plainly without the performance around them, matters more than any single dramatic gesture. I think about that when I'm tired, when the apartment feels too quiet, or the road ahead looks long and uncertain. I think about a 3-year-old handing me a dinosaur book like it was nothing, and a 12-year-old asking me a question off his list and writing the answer down carefully in his notebook. The same kid, 9 years apart, teaching me the same thing both times. You don't get to choose a lot of what happens to you. You don't choose who leaves or when or what they take with them. What you do get to choose is what you build with what's left. Every day, in small decisions that don't feel significant in the moment. Whether to stay honest when it's harder, whether to show up when it's inconvenient, whether to keep your word to a 12-year-old who is watching whether you mean it, you are building something. And what you build reflects, with more accuracy than anything else, who you actually are. That's the thing I'd want someone to take from this, if they take anything. Not that it all worked out neatly, because it didn't. But that the choices you make when things are hard are the ones that define you. Walter the structural engineer would tell you the same thing. The integrity of a structure isn't visible when conditions are good. It only shows under load. I'm still standing. So is Connor. That's enough for me.